I was in the middle of grading a particularly uninspired stack of essays when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Finn about dinner plans. Instead, it was Mom. My thumb hovered over the answer button, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I knew that whenever Delilah called, it was rarely good news. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sawyer, darling," she began, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that always made me wary. "I have the most wonderful idea for your wedding." I could already feel the tension creeping into my shoulders. "Oh, well," she continued, "I was thinking, wouldn't it be lovely if Jasper walked you down the aisle? He is practically family now." I nearly dropped the phone. I felt the blood rush to my face, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Jasper? What about Grandpa Harold?" There was a pause on the line, a pause filled with the kind of manipulation only Delilah could master. "Oh, Sawyer, Harold is so old-fashioned." Jasper would bring a fresh energy to the ceremony. Fresh energy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, Grandpa has been there for me my entire life. He's the one who should walk me down the aisle." Her tone shifted, becoming more insistent. "Sawyer, this is my chance to show everyone how our family is changing and growing. Jasper is important to me." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, this isn't about you. It's my wedding." The line went silent for a moment, and I could almost picture her fuming on the other end. "You always do this, Sawyer. You never think about my feelings." Her words stung, but they were nothing new. "I have to go, Mom. We can talk about this later." I ended the call, my hands trembling slightly. I looked around my classroom, the walls lined with posters of historical figures who had faced far greater battles than this. Yet, the weight of the conversation lingered, heavy and suffocating. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers. This was supposed to be a joyful time, planning a future with Finn, surrounded by the people who truly cared about us. But Delilah had a way of turning everything into a power struggle. Finn's support was my anchor, and I knew he would be there to help me navigate the storm. But the thought of confronting my mother about this, of all things, felt exhausting. I had spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, to avoid these confrontations that seemed to crop up like weeds. The door to my classroom creaked open, and I looked up to see Finn standing there, his familiar grin easing some of the tension. "Hey you," he said, crossing the room to give me a quick kiss. "Hey," I replied, trying to shake off the conversation with Delilah. "How was your day?" He shrugged, pulling up a chair beside me. "You know, the usual. Code. Bugs, more code. You." I hesitated, not wanting to dump my family drama on him the second he walked in, but Finn had a way of knowing when something was off. "Sawyer, what's up?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's Mom. She wants Jasper to walk me down the aisle instead of Grandpa." Finn's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? What did you say?" I told her no, of course. But you know how she is. She made it about her feelings, her image. Finn nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "You know, you do not have to give in to her, right? This is your day." His words were a balm to my frazzled nerves. "I know. It's just complicated." He reached out, taking my hand in his. "We will figure it out. Together." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his steady presence. But as much as I wanted to let it go, I knew this was just the beginning. Delilah would not back down easily, and the thought of the battle ahead loomed over me like a dark cloud. As Finn and I left the school, I could not shake the feeling that this was more than just a wedding squabble. It was a test of my resolve, of my ability to stand up for what I wanted, rather than what Delilah thought was best. And as we walked into the evening, I knew I had to face this head-on, because if there was one thing I had learned from history, it was that sometimes you had to fight for your own story. The drive to my grandparents' house was filled with the kind of quiet that only comes when you are bracing for a difficult conversation. I had not told them about Delilah's latest stunt yet, and the thought of dragging them into this mess made my stomach churn. But I needed their wisdom, their steady reassurance that I was not alone in this. As I pulled into their driveway, the familiar sight of the old oak tree in the front yard brought a sense of calm. Grandpa had planted it the year I was born, and it had grown alongside me, weathering storms and standing tall, much like Harold and Edith themselves. Inside, The house smelled of freshly baked cookies, a testament to Grandma Edith's love for nurturing through food. She greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes sparkling with the kind of understanding that only comes from years of knowing someone's soul. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, leading me into the cozy living room where Grandpa was already settled with a cup of tea. "Hi, Grandma." "Grandpa," I said, trying to muster a smile. Harold looked up from his newspaper, adjusting his glasses. "Sawyer, everything all right?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. "Not really. It's Mom. She called earlier." Grandma and Grandpa exchanged a knowing glance, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. They had seen this pattern before, and it was as familiar to them as it was exhausting. "She wants Jasper to walk me down the aisle instead of you, Grandpa," I finally blurted out, unable to sugarcoat the absurdity of it all. Grandpa's face darkened, a rare flicker of anger crossing his usually calm demeanor. "Jasper? That man has no business being involved in your wedding." Grandma reached out, patting my hand. "Oh, darling, I am so sorry. This must be so hard for you." I nodded, feeling the weight of their understanding and support. "I just do not know what to do. She is not going to let this go." Grandpa leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Sire, you have every right to decide who walks you down that aisle. Do not let her pressure you into something that does not feel right." I knew he was right, but the thought of standing up to Delilah again was daunting. She had a way of twisting things, making me second-guess myself. "Thanks, Grandpa. I wish things were different," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma squeezed my hand. "We are here for you, no matter what. And remember, your happiness comes first." Their words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my anxiety. But as much as I wanted to believe everything would work out, a part of me knew that Delilah would not give up easily. Later, as I was leaving, Grandpa pulled me aside. "Sawyer, I have been meaning to tell you something. I got a call from Delilah last week. She was asking about some financial help." I felt a jolt of surprise. Delilah had not mentioned anything about money. "Did you give her anything?" He shook his head. "I told her we could not. But it seemed off, like she was desperate." This was new, and it added another layer to the tangled web Delilah had spun. Was this about more than just the wedding? Was Jasper pushing her for money? The questions buzzed in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. As I drove home, I could not shake the feeling that there was more to Delilah's demands than met the eye. The pieces did not quite fit, and the thought of what might be lurking beneath the surface sent a shiver down my spine. Finn was waiting for me when I got home, his presence a welcome relief. "How did it go?" he asked, wrapping me in a comforting hug. I leaned into him, grateful for his steadiness. "It was good. They're on my side, but there is something else." Grandpa said Mom asked him for money. Finn pulled back slightly, a frown creasing his brow. "That is strange. Do you think Jasper is involved?" "I do not know," I admitted. "But it feels like there is more going on." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We will figure it out, Sawyer. Whatever it is, we will handle it together." His words were a promise, one that I clung to as the uncertainty of the situation loomed large. Delilah's actions were like a puzzle, each piece more puzzling than the last. And as Finn and I settled in for the night, I knew that uncovering the truth would be the key to finally putting this all to rest. Dinner at my grandparents' house was usually a comforting affair. Tonight, though, the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I sat across from Harold and Edith, the clinking of cutlery and the soft hum of their old radio filling the silence. It was time to share the full extent of Delilah's latest antics. "Grandpa, Grandma," I started, trying to find the right words. "There's something else you should know." They both looked at me, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. I took a deep breath, the weight of the truth heavy on my chest. "Mom asked you for money because she's in some kind of trouble. I think Jasper might be involved." Grandpa set his fork down, his brow furrowing. "What kind of trouble, Sawyer?" "I am not sure," I admitted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But it feels like she's being pushed into something. Maybe Jasper is behind it." Grandma sighed, her eyes filled with worry. "Oh, Sawyer, you have been through so much already." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "I just do not know how to help her without getting dragged into her mess." Grandpa leaned back, a thoughtful look on his face. We will figure it out. But you need to focus on your wedding and your happiness. His words were meant to reassure me, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. It was not just about the wedding anymore. This was about Delilah's life spiraling out of control and the fear that it might pull me down with it. As we cleared the table, the doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a warning. I exchanged a glance with Grandma, who went to answer it. Moments later, she returned with Delilah in tow, her presence like a whirlwind that swept away the evening's calm. Sawyer, Delilah said, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. We need to talk. I crossed my arms, trying to keep my emotions in check. What is it, Mom? She hesitated, glancing at Grandpa and Grandma before speaking. I know you're upset about the wedding, but you have to understand, Jasper is important to me. I could feel the frustration rising, a tide that threatened to overwhelm me. This is not about Jasper, Mom. It's about you trying to control everything. Delilah's eyes flashed with something I could not quite place. Fear, maybe. I just want what's best for you. Is that why you asked Grandpa for money? I shot back, the words sharper than I intended. Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. It's not what you think. Then what is it? I pressed, desperate for answers. She looked away, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. I made some mistakes, Sawyer, but I am trying to fix them. I wanted to believe her, but the years of broken promises and manipulation made it hard. You need to be honest with me, Mom. I cannot help if I do not know what's going on. Delilah's shoulders slumped, a weary sigh escaping her lips. Jasper, he got involved with some people. I thought it would be a good opportunity, but now, her voice cracked, and I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. Now what? Now they're expecting money and I do not have it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling over us like a heavy fog. I glanced at Grandpa and Grandma, their expressions a mix of shock and concern. Mom, I said, my voice softening. You need to get out of this. Jasper is not worth it. She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I know, but I do not know how. The vulnerability in her voice tugged at something deep within me. Despite all the hurt and betrayal, she was still my mother, and I could not just stand by and watch her fall apart. We will figure it out, I promised, though the path ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. As Delilah left, the tension in the room lingered, a reminder of the storm that was still brewing. I looked at Grandpa and Grandma, their unwavering support giving me strength. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Grandpa nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. We are here for you, Sawyer. Always. As I drove home, the gravity of the situation settled over me. Delilah's troubles were deeper than I had realized, and the stakes were higher than just a wedding. This was about family, about breaking a cycle of chaos and finding a way forward. And as I pulled into the driveway, I knew that whatever happened next, I would face it head-on. Because sometimes, the only way to find peace is to confront the storm. The next morning, I found myself pacing the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee doing little to calm my nerves. Finn watched me from the table, a concerned look etched across his face. You're going to wear a hole in the floor, he said gently, trying to lighten the mood. I stopped, running a hand through my hair. I just cannot shake this feeling, Finn. There's something more going on with Mom and Jasper. He nodded, setting his mug down. I know, but we will figure it out. Maybe you should talk to her again, see if she will open up more. I sighed, the thought of another confrontation with Delilah exhausting. I just wish she would be honest for once. Finn stood up, wrapping his arms around me. You are doing everything you can, Sawyer. Do not forget that. His words were comforting, but I knew I needed to take action. The uncertainty of the situation was like a dark cloud hanging over everything, and I could not let it ruin the wedding preparations. Later that day, I decided to visit Delilah. Her apartment was a chaotic mix of bold colors and mismatched furniture, a reflection of her tumultuous personality. She opened the door, surprise flickering in her eyes. Sawyer, she said, stepping aside to let me in. I did not expect to see you. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, we need to talk. I want to help, but I need to know the truth. She hesitated, glancing around the room as if searching for an escape. I told you. It is complicated. I crossed my arms, standing firm. Complicated or not, I need to know what's going on. Jasper is trouble, and I do not want you dragged down with him. Delilah's expression shifted, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, crossing her face. He is not all bad, Sawyer. He just got in over his head. And you are caught in the middle, I said, trying to connect the dots. What did he do? She bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the floor. He borrowed money from some people. I thought it was for a business deal, but now they are demanding it back. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. And they are threatening you? She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not know how bad it was until it was too late. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Jasper, but at the situation Delilah had allowed herself to fall into. Mom, you have to get out of this. You cannot keep covering for him. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But I am scared, Sawyer. I do not know what they will do if we cannot pay. The fear in her voice was real, and it tugged at my resolve. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and I could not just walk away. We will find a way, I promised, though I had no idea how. But you need to cut ties with Jasper. He is only making things worse. Delilah nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I will try. As I left her apartment, a new determination settled over me. This was no longer just about the wedding. It was about protecting my family, even if it meant making difficult choices. Back at home, Finn was waiting for me, his presence a comforting anchor. How did it go? He asked, concern lacing his voice. I sank into the couch beside him, exhaustion washing over me. She's in trouble, Finn. Jasper borrowed money from some dangerous people, and now they are threatening her. Finn's expression darkened, a protective edge to his voice. We need to do something. I know, I said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But I do not know where to start. He took my hand, squeezing it gently. We will figure it out together. Whatever it takes. His words were a lifeline, and I clung to them as the enormity of the task ahead loomed large. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. But as I sat there with Finn, I realized that sometimes standing up for what is right means facing the storm head-on, even when the odds are stacked against you. And as daunting as it was, I knew I had to fight for my family, for my future, and for the peace I so desperately craved. The morning was supposed to be a calm one, filled with last-minute wedding details and excitement. Instead, I found myself staring at the school parking lot, my mind racing with thoughts of Delilah and Jasper's tangled mess. The confrontation at school yesterday had left me rattled, and the whispers of colleagues had only added to the tension. I was about to head inside when my phone buzzed. It was Delilah. My heart sank, knowing this call could only mean more trouble. Sawyer, she started, her voice edged with urgency. We need to meet. It's important. I hesitated, glancing at the school entrance. I am at work, Mom. Can it wait? It cannot, she insisted, a note of desperation creeping in. Please, Sawyer. It's about Jasper. The mention of his name sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I had to go. Okay. I will be there soon. I told the office I had an emergency and drove to a nearby cafe where Delilah was waiting. She looked more frazzled than usual, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I slid into the seat across from her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jasper's disappeared, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He took the money and ran. Now those people are looking for me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean he ran? What about the money he owed? She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. It's gone. All of it. And they think I know where he is. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom, you need to go to the police. I cannot, she said, panic rising in her voice. They will come after me, Sawyer. I am scared. Her fear was palpable, and it stirred something protective in me. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and I could not just leave her to face this alone. We will figure something out, I promised, though the weight of the situation felt crushing. But you need to come clean about everything. Delilah nodded, her hands trembling. I will. Just Please help me. I left the cafe, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Jasper's betrayal had pushed us into a corner, and I knew time was running out. As I drove back to school, I realized I needed to make a choice, either keep trying to juggle everything myself or reach out for help. Finn was waiting for me when I got home, his concern evident. "You look like you have seen a ghost," he said, wrapping me in a hug. "It's Jasper," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's gone, and those people are after Mom." Finn pulled back, his expression serious. "We need to tell someone, Sawyer. This is getting dangerous." "I know," I admitted, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "But I do not know who to trust." He took my hands, his grip firm. "We will figure it out together. But you cannot do this alone." His words were a lifeline, and I knew he was right. I could not keep trying to shoulder this burden on my own. It was time to bring in someone who could help. The next day, I reached out to an old family friend, a lawyer who had helped us before. As I explained the situation, I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear of what might come next, but relief that I was no longer facing it alone. The lawyer listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "This is serious, Sawyer. We need to get your mother somewhere safe and start building a case." The gravity of his words hit me, the reality of the situation sinking in. "What about the wedding?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. He gave me a sympathetic look. "Focus on what you can control. We will handle the rest." As I left his office, I felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I knew I was making the right choice. Delilah's actions had pushed us to the brink, but I was determined to find a way through. Back at home, Finn was waiting with a reassuring smile. "How did it go?" "Better," I said, feeling a newfound resolve. "We have a plan." He nodded, pulling me into a hug. "We will get through this, Sawyer. One step at a time." As I held on to him, I realized that sometimes justice is not about revenge or punishment. It is about protecting those you love, even when it means facing your fears and making difficult choices. And as daunting as it was, I knew I had to see it through to the end. The day of the wedding dawned with a deceptive calm. The sky was clear, and the sun cast a warm glow over everything, as if mocking the turmoil inside me. I stood in the bridal suite, staring at my reflection, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily on my shoulders. Finn knocked softly before entering, his presence a balm to my frazzled nerves. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice full of warmth and reassurance. "Thanks," I replied, managing a small smile. But inside, I felt like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap at any moment. As the guests began to arrive, I tried to focus on the joy of the day, the love and support surrounding us. But the shadow of Delilah's troubles loomed large, and I could not shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Delilah enter the venue, her presence like a storm cloud rolling in. She was alone, her expression unreadable, and I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. "Sawyer," she said, approaching me with a tentative smile. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The tension between us was palpable, a reminder of all the unresolved issues hanging over our heads. "Thank you for coming," I managed, though my voice was tight with emotion. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly. "I know things have been difficult, but I am here for you today." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they only served to remind me of the chaos she had brought into my life. I nodded again, feeling the weight of her presence like a physical burden. As the ceremony began, I took a deep breath, focusing on Finn at the end of the aisle. His smile was steady, a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. Grandpa Harold stood beside me, his presence a comforting anchor. But just as I started down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the venue drew everyone's attention. Delilah was arguing with someone, her voice rising above the murmurs of the guests. I felt a jolt of panic as I realized who it was: Jasper, looking disheveled and desperate. He had returned, and his presence was like a bomb waiting to explode. "Delilah, you need to leave," I heard him say, his voice harsh and insistent. She shook her head, her voice pleading. "Jasper, please. Not now." The tension in the air was electric, and I felt the eyes of every guest on me, waiting to see how I would react. My heart raced, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a vice. I glanced at Finn, his expression a mix of concern and determination. He nodded slightly, a silent message that we would face this together. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Delilah and Jasper, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This is my wedding day. If you cannot be here to support me, then you need to leave. Delilah's eyes filled with tears, a mix of regret and resignation. Jasper opened his mouth to argue, but Finn stepped forward, his presence commanding. You heard her, Finn said, his voice firm. This is not the time or place for this. Jasper hesitated, his gaze flicking between me and Delilah. Finally, he nodded, his expression defeated. Fine. But this is not over. As they left, the tension in the room eased slightly, but the damage was done. My heart ached with the weight of everything that had happened, the chaos that had overshadowed what should have been a perfect day. Harold squeezed my arm gently, his voice low and reassuring. You did the right thing, Sawyer. I nodded, though my heart felt heavy with the knowledge that this was far from over. The ceremony continued, the vows exchanged with a mix of love and determination. But as I stood there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I could not shake the feeling that the storm was not yet past. As the reception began, I found a quiet moment alone, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The idea of revenge or justice felt hollow, overshadowed by the desire for peace and resolution. Finn found me, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. We will get through this, he whispered, his voice a promise. And as I held on to him, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with anger or vengeance, but with love and forgiveness. It was a lesson I was still learning, but one I knew I had to embrace if I ever hoped to find peace. The reception was in full swing, laughter and music filling the air as guests mingled and celebrated. I tried to lose myself in the moment, in the joy of finally being married to Finn, but the events of the day lingered like a shadow. I was talking with Edith when I noticed Delilah standing alone near the edge of the garden, her posture tense and her eyes scanning the crowd. My heart sank as I realized she was waiting for Jasper, hoping he would return. I excused myself and made my way over to her, my resolve hardening with each step. This had to end once and for all. Mom, I said, my voice firm. We need to talk. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and desperation. Sawyer, I know things have been difficult, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. No more excuses, Mom. Jasper is not coming back. He is not going to save you. Her face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting her like a physical blow. I just thought, maybe he would change. I shook my head, the frustration and sadness bubbling to the surface. He is not going to change, Mom. And you cannot keep waiting for him to. Delilah's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her. I do not know what to do, Sawyer. I am scared. I took a deep breath, the enormity of the moment settling over me. You need to let him go. You need to start over. Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of regret and resignation. I do not know if I can. You can, I insisted, my voice softening. But you need to want it. For yourself. She nodded slowly, the realization dawning on her. I have made so many mistakes. We all have, I said gently. But it is never too late to change. As the words left my mouth, I felt a shift, a release of the tension that had been building for so long. Delilah's expression softened, the first glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. I will try, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a start. Just then, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. Jasper had returned, his expression wild and desperate. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Delilah. You cannot just leave me, he shouted, his voice echoing across the garden. Delilah flinched, but I stepped forward, my resolve unshakable. She is not going anywhere with you, Jasper. He sneered, his bravado faltering. You think you can just walk away? I will find you. Finn appeared at my side, his presence a steadying force. You need to leave, Jasper. Now. Jasper hesitated, his gaze flicking between us. The crowd had gathered, the tension palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. "You are done here," I said, my voice unwavering. "It is over." For a moment, Jasper seemed to consider his options. Then, with a final glare, he turned and stalked away, the crowd parting to let him pass. As he disappeared into the night, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The storm had passed, leaving a sense of calm in its wake. Delilah stood beside me, her expression a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Sawyer." I nodded, the warmth of Finn's hand in mine grounding me. "We will figure this out, Mom. Together." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and celebration, the tension of the day slowly fading into the background. As Finn and I danced under the stars, I realized that the true battle had not been against Jasper or Delilah, but within myself. I had faced my fears, stood up for what was right, and found a way to protect my family without losing myself in the process. It was not about revenge or justice, but about finding peace and moving forward. And as I looked around at the people who had supported me through it all, I knew that I was ready. Ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold, with Finn by my side and the strength of my family behind me. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of gratitude and reflection. Finn and I spent our honeymoon in a quiet cabin by the lake, far from the chaos that had marked the lead-up to our special day. It was a time to reconnect, to savor the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. As we sat by the water, the sun setting in a blaze of color, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened. The battles fought, the truths uncovered, and the choices made. It was a journey that had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also shown me the strength I possessed and the love that surrounded me. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. I resumed my teaching, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of the classroom. Finn continued his work, always there with a reassuring smile and a steady presence. Delilah, true to her word, had started to make changes. She attended therapy, confronting the demons that had haunted her for so long. It was not an easy path, but each step she took was a step toward healing, and I was proud of her for it. One afternoon she called, her voice filled with a mix of nervousness and hope. "Sawyer, would you like to join me for a session? I think it might help us both." I hesitated, the old fears and resentments whispering in the back of my mind. But I knew this was an opportunity for us to rebuild, to find a way forward that was not mired in the past. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I would like that." The session was emotional, a raw and honest conversation that laid bare the wounds we had both carried. Delilah apologized, her sincerity evident, and I found myself forgiving her, not just for her sake, but for mine. As we left the therapist's office, I felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on the journey we had all taken. The themes of revenge and justice had given way to something deeper, understanding, forgiveness, and the realization that true strength lay in vulnerability and love. One evening, as Finn and I sat on our porch, I shared my thoughts with him. "I used to think that justice meant making things right, but now I see it's about finding peace, even if things are not perfect." He nodded, his hand warm in mine. "You have come a long way, Sawyer, and I am so proud of you." His words filled me with warmth, a reminder of the love that had been my anchor through it all. "Thank you," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of twilight, I knew that our story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and struggle, but I was ready to face them, because I had learned that family was not just about blood, but about the connections we forged, the love we shared, and the strength we found in each other. And as I looked at Finn, at the life we were building together, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, with courage and love. In the quiet of the evening, a lingering thought crossed my mind, a question that would remain unanswered, a reminder that life was unpredictable and beautifully complex. But as I sat there, surrounded by the peace I had fought so hard to find, I realized that the uncertainty was part of the journey, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And with that thought, I embraced the unknown, ready to write the next chapter of our lives, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities.